So thank you for the introduction. Yeah, I'm equally passionate about reading. You know that.
I
So
know that I
hence
do.
the topic here. So yeah, we'll be talking about integrating reading in the original into your classroom. And I actually had an older version of this presentation, but I tweaked it for our conference because I think it's kind of broader right now. So I hope that everyone will find something to like implement into your classes or maybe run a separate kind of format for your students. So we'll delve into that a little later. And a little bit about me for those who don't know me. Here are all the hard skills. You can see my degrees and my certificates. So I've been teaching for more than 10 years. Oh my gosh. And I used to work with IELTS preparation for the first part of my career. Like I specialized in that. But then I actually switched the niche a little and I started teaching higher levels using authentic materials. And that's how I got the initial idea for running my book club and doing some courses based on books and articles. So authentic reading texts, basically. Apart from that, I'm an avid reader, so I read a lot, and I think for the past couple of years, I've been reading solely in English, because I need to get a lot of ideas for the book clubs and read all the modern literature. And I'm a book club host, so like more than 2 years ago, I got this like aha moment to combine my passion for English and my love for reading. And I started running my own book club where we read one book in the original every month or so. So like, sometimes longer, sometimes just 1 month. And this book club actually had already 42 sessions. Sometimes we read two books a month, sometimes we read one book. So I have several groups with books. And just the most astonishing stat I actually calculated yesterday that more than 300 people participated in it. So I'll be speaking from my own experience. So like all of the things that I learned through trial and error. So only hands-on experience in this presentation. So that's why I picked actually this topic for us today. So if you have any questions or you plan to run your own book club, feel free to drop your messages in the chat. I will probably come back to them at the end of the presentation, so feel free to do so. So in the book club, we read modern literature only. So I had some experience of reading classical literature at university. Obviously, I think those who have the background in linguistics or philology have the same kind of experience. But for several reasons, I choose to run the book club based on modern books only. And I also created several book courses. So we'll be discussing the difference between those two. As you could run a book club, which is a special format. You could create kind of asynchronous courses for your students on some online platforms or PDF workbooks, but it's a different kind of way of working with books. So we'll come back to that, circle back to that a little later. So our plan for today will first of all zero in on the reasons for reading in the original. I'm pretty sure that you maybe know some of the rationale behind reading in the original, but I'll summarize it as the like a set of ideas that make reading beneficial. Then we'll talk about the reading materials, like authentic reading materials that you could implement into your lessons, like outside of classroom or as part of your main course. And then I'll share the life hacks, the tips, the things that help me to save a lot of time when preparing classes based on books and articles. So feel free to, again, take some screenshots or write down the resources that I will recommend. And as usual, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, drop them in the chat, so in order not to forget, and I'll come back to them a bit later. So as for the reasons, I'm pretty sure that if you're a language teacher or a language learner, you have noticed some of those reasons already. And here I'll obviously start with the vocabulary. because books and articles and other authentic reading sources are a great, like source of interesting expressions, especially if we talk about modern sources, yeah, like modern books and like recent articles or blog posts. They contain this abundance of juicy expressions and relevant phrases that we could learn and pick up from reading in the original. And not only does it develop the active vocabulary range here in our students, it also broadens their passive vocabulary, as we're in no way able to learn all the expressions that we stumble across in a book or in an article, but we still remember them. Yeah, so like we have this exposure to a variety of phrases, and students can actually learn how to, like acquire these phrases gradually through just like extensive reading, even if we don't make any tasks for them or we don't ask them to pay any sort of special attention to the vocabulary, they still do that subconsciously, sort of. And obviously, grammar is also improved through reading in the original, as again, the same thing happens as with the vocabulary. We go through the book, we notice the sentence structures. We also kind of develop this eye for grammar structures, yeah, like different tenses and constructions. So especially reading a book, we stumble across this more kind of sophisticated written style grammar that is super handy if we prepare our students for exams in particular. And as as for vocabulary and grammar, I'm pretty sure that you've heard of noticing, which is a special skill. Yeah, when we notice basically different constructions previously studied, and that helps us to actually solidify this knowledge in our brain and in our students' brain. Yeah, that is a kind of this modern skill. I'm pretty sure that you've heard of it, but a lot of articles and research is dedicated to noticing. So here it's a vital skill that we could remember only, we could develop it only through a lot of exposure. Yeah, and books and articles give us this chance. Then the third reason why one should read in the original is contextual guessing. In Russian, we call it языковая догадка. Yeah, so this is also a very vital kind of compensation strategy that people use when they don't know an expression or they stumble across an unfamiliar grammar construction, but they can work it out from the context. Super important, again, when it comes to real life, because not always we can ask some clarifying questions, not always we can ask to repeat, but we still need to understand what the other person is saying or writing. And the same happens in books. Experienced readers usually abandon this hope to check all the expressions in the dictionary pretty soon because it's just boring and you don't want to get distracted from the plot or for what is happening in the book. So they just learn to understand certain language means from the context. And it's super valuable. It's the skill that every proficient language learner should have. And books are a great basis for that because books are pretty big and you don't want to like waste precious time and miss out on the plot. So this is what we learn to do while reading extensively, especially. And the last but not least reason for reading in the original is obviously the overall intelligence and expanding the scope, yeah, of our learners. So like reading actually does make them smarter. And while reading, we have a chance to compensate for their gaps in life experience or in the knowledge on some on some abstract topics, sorry. Especially it is relevant for younger people, teenagers, young adults. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that if you're teaching higher levels, but younger people, you had this problem in the classroom when you ask them some kind of abstract question and they have nothing to talk about because they have zero relevant experience. And reading articles or books actually helps to tackle this problem as they gain this secondhand experience and they're able to implement this into their language learning process. For example, I had a lot of IELTS students that were pretty young, like 16, 20. But in IELTS, you have a lot of questions that require you to analyze some, like really sophisticated topics. For example, I don't know, raising children or environmental disasters, whatever. And not all the people of such age have relevant knowledge or experience. So we used to read articles, authentic articles on these topics, and some books, like nonfiction books mostly, that allow them to gain some insights, gain some perspective on this topic, and actually be able to speak and write on this topic. So this is super valuable. And yeah, books are a great ground for talking about the topics that are not so familiar or not so relevant, but you still can think hypothetically, you could speculate on those topics. So I hope that I convinced you. Please send a plus in the chat if you feel like using some authentic reading materials in your classroom. If you're still not convinced, then I hope you'll be. Then we'll move on to the next point. As usual, remind you to send some questions if you have any in our chat. I'm trying not to get distracted, so I'm not looking in the chat right now. But yeah, if you have anything that I should clarify later, please do. And we'll move on to the next part. Here, I actually wanted to recommend you this book that is, like I always come back to it when I'm in search for some new ideas regarding reading. And in this book, actually, in the very first chapter, you could find a lot of scientific evidence on reading in the original and extensive reading in the classroom. So here is my quote that I actually I practice what I preach. I include reading in the original into my classes because it's definitely such a huge amount of language, such a huge amount of input. It's incomparable to other sources. Even if you even if your students like watching movies, for example, or watching TV shows in English, if you take the amount of text that one episode has, even the whole series has, and compare it to an average book, it pales in comparison, trust me. So in an average book, you have much more input, much more language, and much more variety as well than in a TV show or in a podcast, YouTube video, etc. So it's definitely this unique type of content that we shouldn't miss out on. Yeah, even if you don't want to include a lot of authentic reading into your classes, you could still use it as a supplement, or you could maybe create some asynchronous courses or materials for your students. So don't disregard it. Yeah, it's definitely very beneficial for our students and for us as teachers because it gives us a lot of room for developing our own skills as well. So let's move on to the next section and we'll actually compare different authentic sources that we could use in our classrooms. And if we actually divide them into categories, I will move on from the easiest ones to implement to kind of more challenging ones. These are definitely whole books. And if you have no experience or little experience of working with authentic reading sources, I suggest that you start with articles. Articles are just great, especially nowadays because there are so many online resources. There are so many, e-versions of magazines. You could definitely tap into this articles and select the ones that would come in handy for your students, for your classroom, for the level you're working with. And the great thing about articles, you could always work with just parts of them because usually modern articles are written in such a way that you could just borrow a paragraph or a section from an article and work with it, like build the whole lesson based on this one paragraph, for example. I actually use this article on my Telegram channel, and here it's preceded by a test, which is supposed to kind of explore the type of holiday that is perfect for you. And then you could read only one paragraph that actually matches the type of holiday that is suitable for you. So you will eventually just read a test, which is very concise, compact, and then read the small paragraph. But it's still authentic reading. It's a real article for a real magazine, not from a course book, and it's a great way to start if you want to start implementing, authentic materials. So I will give you some life hacks later on how to work more effectively with articles, but still keep it in mind if you want to start reading some authentic text, but you shy away from books or, like something more substantial. So articles are a great way to start. Then you could also work with abridged books and book abstracts. Book abstracts you could borrow from fictional literature. For example, you can read just a couple of chapters, and then if a student wants to continue, they can read the book on their own. Or you can select even part of a chapter. It works as well. Or you could work with abridged books. Online, you could find book summaries or kind of reiterations, like, shorter versions of different books, fiction and nonfiction. And there is a very cool app that I love using. I will share it a little bit later, where you could find abridged audio versions of books and abridged texts of books, fiction and nonfiction, that I find super cool for your lessons. So feel free to use that as well as an alternative to reading, like big books or reading the whole book in your classroom. So this is also a great way to adapt authentic reading materials. And the final, like the ultimate level is reading whole books. There are also different formats that you can try. That could be a book club, like the one that I'm running. That could be a book course, which is usually asynchronous, or it has some workbook or online platform where students work on their own. Or it could be home reading. I'm pretty sure that those who had some literature classes at university remember this format. Yeah, when you read a book and then you have some in-class discussions based on this book. So this would also work. We'll see the differences between those formats. But before that, I wanted to share a couple of resources with you. Feel free to scan the QR codes that I have on the slides. So here I gave an example of an article. Again, it comes from a modern magazine, Happyful, and there's a website version. So you could find a lot of articles there, and some of them are suitable even for intermediate levels like B1, B2. So your students don't have to be higher levels. Yes, you could already start implementing it with at this like intermediate, upper intermediate levels. And on my channel, I actually share a lot of articles weekly. So I started it almost 2 years ago, and I have a bank of articles. You could scan a code and you will see the post where I share the link to the bank. And basically what you have there, you have more than 50, I think maybe more than 60 articles already on different topics for different levels. And well, some articles are accompanied by some ideas for your classes, even ready-made materials in different formats, or at least suggestions, like how to work with these articles. So it could save you a lot of time. Or you could create your own bank and just when you stumble across some interesting material, save it, mark it with the topic and the level, or adapt it. Yeah, so you can make different tasks to make the article readable for your students. So this is one way to go and a great way to start if you feel like books are not for you at the moment. Then this wonderful app that I'm a fan of, which is called Blinkist. And it's an app for your phone, or you could also use a website version. Unfortunately, the subscription is paid, but they have this great offer to listen to or like read one book per day. It's refreshed daily, so every day you have a different book, and you can actually use it for your classes. And if I'm not mistaken, there's also a Telegram channel that kind of mirrors the app. So they also publish this free daily books, so you could use it. And here again, if you scan this QR code, you will find my Telegram post on this app and how I use it in my classes. The best thing about it that it has an audio version of the book and a text version, which is cool. For example, you can send a snippet of the audio version, work with it with your students, and then send the whole version of this abridged book to read, for example, outside of classroom, and do that. Yeah, so this is a great thing to use, especially if your students don't have time to read whole books. But you know, there are a lot of nonfiction books that you know, you don't want to waste a lot of time reading them. You just want to get the best information and get all the insights quickly. And this is the app to go. You could also Google it, and on Pinterest you can find a lot of book summaries or like retold books and use them in the classroom as well. So this is very flexible. I can come up with lots of ideas how to use this sources in the classroom, so explore them on your own. And yeah, so this is also a way to move on from shorter articles to abridged versions of books or like book summaries. A great way to build up, you know, before switching to books. And I wanted to demonstrate actually how I implemented abstracts of books. So this wasn't a short version of the book. That was actually a whole nonfiction book that I used, and I taught. You know, like I have an authentic materials course that I run with C1, C2 students, and there I try to use different types of authentic materials. So once in a while, I use books as well. And for this lesson that was on cognitive biases, I used this book called The Biased Brain. What I did, I took the introduction from this book, which is pretty short, like a couple of pages, and I used it for my flipped classroom material. So I sent it to my students prior to our lesson, and they worked with the vocabulary. They had time to kind of analyze what cognitive biases are and answer some comprehension tasks. And then I had like 8 people in my group. I selected different chapters from this book, the most interesting biases, and I send them different biases. So individually, they got one page. This is like a one-page format about different biases. And in class, we did this information gap activity. So when one person has a piece of information that no one else has, and we completed the table. So they had 3 questions to ask and kind of summarize the part of the book that they read. And then we completed the table and we kind of analyzed, answered some discussion questions when we have completed all the information. That was really cool because they had a chance to read part of the book. We actually got a lot of information from it because we had 8 biases and the introduction. And then I send them the name of the book after our class, and I know that some people actually read the whole book after that. So if they were interested in the topic, they had a chance to do so. So this is what you can do. I also had a separate lesson on Atomic Habits. That is another best-selling nonfiction book. So I also took part of it. They also have like great summaries in this book, so you could use it as part of as a text, you know, like combine the summaries. And we did the whole lesson discussing habits, but we didn't read the whole book. We just read part of it. And you don't really miss out on a lot of things. So this is the best thing about nonfiction. I think you could do the same with fiction, but that would probably require more preparation and planning how to implement all of that into your classes. So switching to whole books. First of all, the first question that actually comes to our mind when we prepare ourselves for working with books in the classroom is obviously how to choose the book. And I think I saw a similar question in the chat, so I'm gonna address that here. And what I personally do before choosing a book. Well, obviously you need to read a lot yourself. Yeah, I advise you against choosing the books that you haven't read because it might seem relevant, it might seem interesting, modern, etc. But You never know how the book ends. You never know what language range it has. So I highly recommend you to go through the book yourself before reading it with your students. That will help you a lot. And I usually zero in on the books that are optimal in size. If your students are intermediate, like B1, B2, I recommend you to take shorter books, like 200 pages, maybe 300 pages, depends on how much time you have. But with more advanced students, you could take a bigger book, just break it down into, this bite-sized pieces. For example, read by chapters or read by some abstracts. When I run my book club, we have mostly like experienced readers there. So we read around 80, 100 pages per week. It's like 10 pages per day, which is doable for these people. But if your students are less experienced, so you could break it down into smaller pieces so that they have this situation of success. They manage to read the necessary part before your discussion. So make sure that the size and the parts are readable. Yeah, like they're adequate for your students. Then the goal. Why the goal is important, I'll explain. So when we choose a book to read, we could actually have three goals in mind. Usually all of them boil down to these three types of focus. First goal is content. So when we are reading a book, for what is in it. So, for example, we read the book on cognitive biases because we wanted to learn about different cognitive biases. The goal wasn't the language as such, because all the expressions that we practiced, I took from the introductory part
Какие выбросы, Павел?
that everyone read.
Какие выбросы?
Yes, and here
Ага.
we read it for content, and it wasn't that relevant what kind of language they have in this part. Yeah, and you could also read the books for language.
Они
So
асфальт там
when
кладут.
in okay, someone turned on this the audio, I guess. So yeah, you could also read the book for language when your ultimate goal is to mine some interesting expressions, maybe grammar or some other, like language related things from the book. In this case, maybe genre and plot won't be that important. So what would be important is the vocabulary that the writer uses. So that is why I recommend you to read the book first, because you will never know what kind of language the writer uses unless you read the book yourself. Yeah, so in this case, I usually pre-work with the book. So while I'm reading, I'm already highlighting some juicy phrases, some relevant grammar points for my students. And then when I have finished reading the book, I can actually assess the amount of useful language that it contains and decide if it's useful for my students or for the book club or not. So in this case, you could keep that in mind as well. And the third goal is actually some background knowledge or maybe the topics. Yeah, so some books that we read, I choose because they offer such a great variety of like cultural and social topics to discuss. So it's not knowledge that we are taking from the book. It's not like that we acquire some useful facts. It's just the a very fruitful basis for discussion. Yeah, and I sometimes pick books where I have a lot of ideas, what questions to ask, how to navigate this discussion. And you could do it with pretty much any book if you have enough imagination. Yeah, but there are some books that are really great for just, tapping into some more abstract ideas. Then the genre is really important. And here I actually I would advise you to ask your students. You could conduct some kind of poll and reflect on what they are interested in. You could ask what types of genres they read, if they read in their native language, in Russian, for example, or some other language. And if they are really into some genre, I recommend you to start with it, because if people are interested in what is happening in the book, they will be much more motivated to finish the book. Even though they might not understand all the expressions, they might have some obstacles, like language-wise, they will still be eager to get to the end and find out what happens, how the book finishes. So this is a great source of motivation as well. So As for genres that everyone usually likes, those are some detective stories that are usually easy to follow, and you want to, like find out who the guilty party is, something like that. Thrillers are great. Yeah, they keep you on the edge of your seat, and students are usually quite into them. Or that could be something that your students already read in Russian, but they would reread it in the original. So you remove this linguistic difficulty, yeah, but they will still be quite eager to compare it, for example, with the Russian version and the translated version. And as I mentioned before, a poll would be a great way to start. So you could start with some questionnaire, ask your students if they read in their own language, if they would like to read in the original, what types of books they would like to read. You could even zero in on some books that you've read and you think are great for your students and offer them these options. Maybe send them some snippets or synopsis of the book and ask them to just choose the book that they would like to read together. So I think this is like a very personalized experience. So highly recommend asking your students what to read with them, because if you choose the book that you like, but they don't, that will be quite hard to, motivate them to work with this book. So, as for different examples here, I wanted to share one book. Like, you could actually use it with your students if you're teaching B1 students and higher. This is a great, actually, example for reading clubs or reading courses, because it's not a big book. It's just 310 pages, and it's, very well paced, like not slow moving, not a page turner. It's like just normal, very comfortable read. It's a fictional novel, but it's super relevant to real life. So, like a lot of people will find something that resonates with them in this book. And here it will be suitable both for teenagers, because the main character is a teenager, but it will be super interesting to discuss with teachers, with adults, with parents, if you teach adults, who have kids already. Like a variety of people. Like I think it covers a very broad audience, and it has so many interesting topics to discuss. I read it and I actually considered it for my book club, but I thought it was a bit too easy maybe for them, because my book club mostly is attended by teachers. So, but it's great actually. If you want to do something with books in your classroom and you teach teenagers or younger adults, or adults who are into some, like social issues and inclusivity, school related things, childhood related things. It's just great. I think everyone will find something to talk about here. So this is one of the examples of such books that would probably be very good for building a course on or discussing in a book club. So save it, take a screenshot or write down the name. Yeah. And here we'll move on to different types of working with books. I'll be brief. I'll just show you some examples and explain the difference. Yeah, like how book club is different from a book course, and what about home reading, how you could organize that. So again, a couple of practical ideas. So as for the book clubs, the greatest thing about book clubs is that you can run them separately, like in addition to your main course. And you can actually invite your current students to attend the book club, or you could do it throughout other means, maybe using like a word of mouth, your former students or your potential students, or just someone who is interested in it. You could build a whole community, because it's not a permanent format of working, but judging by my own book club, there are people who attend monthly. I have a couple of people who never missed a session throughout 2 years, actually. And this is a great way to build this community of like-minded people, of people who like books, like reading in the original, and they have no one to discuss those books with. So love this format. I think it's super flexible. Depending on your goals, depending on your audience, you could structure it in a variety of ways. It could be something more lighthearted, when you just read a book together and then you gather once a month and discuss the book in this kind of free format. It could be something more structured, the way I do it. So we have discussions every week, and we have kind of this organized discussion. So we start with the vocabulary that we practice, then we talk about the plot and the characters, and we kind of build up to some abstract discussions based on the book. So they could be topics that are not directly mentioned in the book, but inspired us to talk about it. So you could have more superficial discussions, more kind of free discussions, or more in-depth discussions when you have questions, you have tasks, you have vocabulary activities. So it's up to you. It's a very nice format, and you could, there is no like right or wrong way to do it. It's just you should maybe ask your questions or potential participants and structure it in the way you like it. So there are so many ways to go, which is great for book clubs. And I wanted to show you here an example of my discussion. So why I do it this way. As I mentioned, mostly I have teachers in the book club and higher level learners. So we go through 3 stages, like from easier tasks. Vocabulary is relatively easy because we usually practice it through Quizlet sets that I prepare, and we have some vocabulary practice in the chat. Then we talk about some factual things, so could be plot or characters or some quizzes, like comprehension questions or recalling important details from the book abstract. And then we delve into more kind of abstract philosophical questions, those ones that require some personal experience or, like speculation. So could be, like some philosophical topics or symbols, even literary aspects of the text. And in the end of the course, we usually talk about our final impression. So here, if you're teaching exam classes, especially Cambridge exams, this is also like a popular writing format, so could be useful even to write their own reviews. You could also do different projects based on books or creative tasks. So as I said, it's just a never-ending list of things you could do with book clubs. Yeah, and the greatest thing that you could actually combine the students for like your private students or your group students or people from different groups. You could run a book club for colleagues, whatever floats your boat here. Actually, love the format, so highly recommend you to try it. Then if we compare it with book courses are more structured because they imply the asynchronous way of working. That could be an online platform where you build your course. I do this on Edvibe or ProgressMe, also known as ProgressMe. And I create a set of lessons on the book. So I also break it down into chapters or parts. I prepare vocabulary activities, comprehension activities, and some speaking and writing tasks. So a student could do this course on their own, in their own time, whenever they want. So you could actually structure the pace. For example, if you're taking a break with your students and you want them not to forget English during this time, you could build a short course based on the book or articles or short stories and design this task so the students would work on their own. They will maybe have some automatically corrected questions, and they will be able to record speaking tasks or complete writing assignments, and you will have a chance to check those works, yeah, on the platform or on some other format. That works great with all ages. And I also mentioned at the beginning of my presentation that I created 3 book courses, and I used them in addition to the book club. So I had some books that we read in the book club, and some people participated in this kind of more lighthearted version when you just read the book, discuss it online. And some people had a course on the platform, so they worked like more persistently with the language. And they had additional authentic materials to delve deeper into the book. And they also attended the book club session. So this is this like combo that provides you with a lot of practice, a lot of knowledge, and allows you to practice all the skills, yeah, speaking and writing included. So you could actually, again, tap into any kind of skills that you want to practice. That could be an asynchronous course based only on vocabulary. If you want a book, you could make some social cultural guide for a book. Yeah, like we read The Help, that hinges on the story of African American maids in the United States. And I found a lot of extra materials just to understand the social context of the book and the cultural aspects of the book. And I had this sort of guide on Notion. But if you wanted, you could do a whole course on that just for people to maybe get a lot of insights into the history and social aspects of the book as well. So again, you can focus on whatever you want. It's asynchronous. It's great. So if you don't want to run any sessions, online sessions to discuss the book, you could prepare this course and use it as a supplement, as a synchronous type of learning. So again, a lot of options to implement it into your classes here. And the last format that I find a little bit more tricky to implement because it requires in-class time. This is so-called home reading. You could call it any other way, but this is usually part of the main course. So we have our normal classes with our private students or with our groups, and we use some reading materials, authentic reading materials, as part of this main course. So ideally, the reading materials should go hand in hand with what we are doing in class. For example, we have a course book and we just covered the topic of the environment, let's say. So we did the unit on that from the course book. And then I want to read, for example, a chapter from a nonfiction book on the environment and some like environmental disasters and discuss it with my students. So I should prepare again some tasks for them to read, like to read in a guided way, not just like blindly. I maybe would create some vocabulary activities or grammar activities depending on what we did in class. And I need to find the time how to discuss the book in class. So you could do it in a different way, again, depending on your goal. That could be a project. For example, they read part of the book and they came up with some original way to present their ideas. That could be an infographic or a presentation, even a TED Talk. Yeah, that could be just in-class discussion, like we prepare questions and so conduct it in a sort of like a speaking club way. That could be a written response to what they read. So again, keep your goal in mind. Yeah, so like why they're reading, what you want to gain from that, and just implement it into your classes. As I said, it's a little bit harder to do it on a regular basis because we have so many things to do in class usually, but you could do it in a very slow pace. Yeah, and again, read abstracts, not whole books. That would work great as well. I did it actually with my teenage classes when I prepared for Olympiads. And in Olympiads, if you're familiar with the format, they have a lot of cultural aspects that are tested. So we read a book on the British people and some books, nonfiction books about the American society, and we discussed this like relevant chapters that were applicable to Olympiads as such. So in such a way, it could also work if you feel like reading, authentic reading would come in handy for your students. So practical tips. I'm running a bit late. I hope that I will have enough time to share everything with you. I will be brief, so you could take screenshots, or I'll send you actually the presentation after my talk, so you could discover some of the things here. So when it comes to articles, I use articles a lot, so I actually summarized it in 4 main tips that help me a lot to save a lot of time. And the first tip is organization. I find it much more efficient to actually save articles and collect articles that are great for my future classes rather than search for articles for a particular topic. Like, oh, I'm having a lesson on this topics with this students. I will go and search for an article to use in class. That would take ages, trust me. But I have a database, like I have my bank and I have my kind of private Telegram channel where I send some articles and I use tags to mark the level and the topic, and it works great. If I need some article, I go to my bank, I go to this private Telegram channel, and I search in my database, and it I usually find something that I can use. You could also Google with parentheses. You know, if you insert the keywords and you put them in parentheses, it will look for this exact word combination online. And you could add magazine or article or blog, and it will find you articles from different online sources. It also usually helps me. So you should try it out if you're looking for some, authentic reading materials, but you don't have anything in store. That usually helps. You could also search on Pinterest. There are lots of articles as well that I love using, and they are normally beautifully designed, so you could put them on Mirror or just send them to your students and work with them straight away. Yeah, so my bank I already mentioned. In the presentation, you can use the QR code. You can go to my channel and you'll find it there. And speaking of Telegram, there are also a lot of channels run by teachers and channels that actually publish articles and magazines. So I suggest you subscribe to them. And when you see some article that would be relevant to your class or like to your course, save it for later and use it then. Yeah, so like don't forget about it, because I usually see some nice article and I say, oh, I should use it later on in this topic. And if I don't save it, I will never find it after that. So please save it. Don't repeat my mistakes. Yeah, so that comes in very handy later on. Then another life hack. If you decide to work with books, please work with the books while reading, because I personally know some people who run book clubs as well, or they want to use books in their classroom, and they say, okay, I read this wonderful book. Now I need to reread it to prepare for the book club. I never do that. I actually always read with this thing in mind that I might use this book somewhere like in my book club or with my students. So I have this, ingrained habit of annotating all the books I'm reading. Paper books, you can actually see like the paper books with bookmarks in my case, and e-versions as well. So I always highlight interesting phrases to use for my Quizlet sets or creating tasks. I always make notes on the plot. So I highlight relevant quotes, I make some notes with questions, I Google some interesting details and also kind of attach them to the e-version of my book. It's a bit harder to do with the paper books, but you could still do that if you use bookmarks or sticky notes or something like that. So please don't rely on rereading the book. As I said, it's much easier to do while you're reading the book for the first time. Maybe you will have to reread it again, but still, you will have all these ideas, you'll have the vocabulary lists ready. So please don't miss out on this chance to have some suggestions while you're reading. So annotate the books. Then I'm a fan of organization, as you can see. I already mentioned it, I think, 3 times today, that what helps me a lot is organizing the vocabulary. So what I do when I finished reading the book and I highlighted the expressions or I underlined them using a pencil or a highlighter in my paper version of the book, I make a spreadsheet. I usually use Google Sheets, but you could use some other types of resources. Feel free. What I find most convenient is it should be one sheet, not separate, folders, not separate sections. Because if you make one database, it will be very convenient for you to use to search for words and to import to Quizlets or Anki's. You can actually highlight this table, and when you create a Quizlet set, you import the words there, and it creates cards. It saves a bunch of time, actually. And you can see that I also highlight some expressions. Usually when I create tasks for my students and I have used some expression already, I highlight it so that I see which ones I haven't revised, which ones I haven't included in the tasks. It makes the preparation so much easier. And I also practice noticing in the book club and with my students. And, having run 42 sessions of books, I obviously don't always remember where we had this or that expressions. So if I'm not sure, I just go and check it in the spreadsheet. So for example, if I stumble across illiterate, and I don't remember in which book I had it, I go to Google Sheets, I insert the word illiterate, and it actually finds the spreadsheet where it was mentioned. So very handy. I do the same thing with my authentic courses that are not based on books only, but well, with all my groups, it's super convenient. So do that if you decide to work with books. And obviously, as a modern teacher, I work with artificial intelligence a lot. And when it comes to books and book clubs and book courses, it provides you with so many interesting ideas and resources. Here I have an example of images that I generated for one book that we read. It was The Kite Runner. And I ran a book club based on this book, and I couldn't find, like suitable pictures on the internet to include in my presentations on my mirror boards. So I went to Canva, and they actually have an AI tool that generates images in one style. So I generated, I think, around 10 images to use on different boards based on book abstracts. So I included several sentences from the chapter, like key ideas from the chapter, and it generated these pictures. I think it looks great. And they were all the same, in the same style, in the same color. As like a visual perfectionist, I couldn't but like admire that. So that is very suitable. You could also use other resources to generate pictures. But when it comes to books, some books don't have so many resources. They don't have so many illustrations online. So you can create your own ones just to supply your students with some visual cues, like visual aids. I also use ChatGPT and Twee to create tasks. You could create tasks based on articles easily. You could create comprehension questions, vocabulary questions, quizzes, etc. Yes, like here, it saves again a lot of time when preparing. And when creating book courses as well. And here, I don't remember which source I used. I think it was something like revision. Don't remember. I will actually share it here. And I think, Nadia, you had some kind of guide with AI resources. I think I borrowed some ideas from there as well. But there are, yeah, a lot of AI sources you could use to
Probably.
create quizzes, to create multiple choice questions, open-ended questions, yeah. And even you could insert a bigger chunk of a book or an article, and it would come up with a set of questions. Yeah, so I usually proofread and check these questions, but still, it's much easier, much faster than creating them from scratch on your own. Yeah, so here artificial intelligence does help quite a lot. And my last tip um, is to Google. Best tip ever. No, actually, you could find a lot of study guides on the internet. For example, I did a book club on The Handmaid's Tale. I'm pretty sure you're familiar with the book or the TV show at least. And this is a very popular book. It's not that new anymore. So you could Google the name of the book and the word study guide, and it actually gives you a lot of ideas. Even for much fresher, like newer books, that you could find some study guides or book club questions. And this is a resource I use a lot. It's called bookclubs.com. Pretty straightforward. And there are lots of bestsellers and popular modern books that are supplied with topics to discuss, discussion guides, relevant books to read if you want to delve into the same genre or the same topic. So not all the questions you'll find there, but like a lot of ideas and, like sources as well. So I love using it. Unfortunately, they don't have all the books I use for the book club, but some of them are there. So do Google it, yeah, if you struggle to come up with your own questions or topics, or maybe you run out of ideas, you could always look for that on the internet, and well, you can find pretty much anything there, so not a problem these days. So I also have a couple of useful guides myself. You can scan a code and it will direct you to my bot on Telegram. And you can find there my reading in the original guide. It's completely free. It's in Russian. You could send it to your students or you can look through it yourself. I also shared a lot of materials and sources that I use there. So I also included some, ideas from this presentation. It's a bit more detailed. So you could scan a code and get this guide for free. It's on Notion. So you could save it in your Notion page, or you could save it as a PDF, works as well. And you could also subscribe for my book club announcements if you feel like it's up your alley and you would like to participate. You can subscribe and you'll get all the announcements there in the bot. So you can also do it later, as I will send you the presentation. Yeah, so the guide is great if you struggle, if you don't know how to like build this reading skills in your students, or maybe you want to explore reading in the original yourself, which is great as a way to maintain your own language level. So feel free to download it. And yeah, this is all. You have time for questions. I will check the chat now. And yeah, if you have anything to ask me, feel free. You could do that in Russian as well.
I have something
Not
to
forbidden.
say, not to ask you, really. Thank you so, so, so much. I enjoyed your talk immensely. That was amazing and insightful and all of the good things. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Masha, thank you so much for being with us today. It's been a pleasure to see you today with such an amazing topic for discussion. Actually, great, absolutely.
Thank you. Yeah, I enjoyed it. I enjoy talking about reading.
Yeah, that makes two
I
of
hope it's
us.
contagious. Yeah. Yeah, about Canva, yeah, they have this AI tool to generate pictures. I think it has limited the limited number of requests, but I haven't run out of them even though I use it quite regularly, so I think it's
And
pretty.
are you using paid subscription
No,
or?
no, it's
Oh,
free.
okay, okay.
Yeah, I use a free
Well,
version,
that's quite
and
optimistic.
I didn't notice any limitations so far. Yeah. Right. I will look through the questions if I should answer something. Okay. Great book. Yeah. Yeah, I think Olga's question I addressed. Yeah, so how I choose the books to read. So with the book club, I usually suggest a couple of ideas. We have one common chat for all the people who participated in the book club, and I run polls there. So if I read some books that I would like to take to the book club, I usually suggest them in the chat, and people vote. With my students, I usually take only abstracts, so I choose the abstracts that I find relevant myself, and they read. As for resources, with list of books, to be honest, I don't have such resources. If anyone has this knowledge, please share. Yeah. I think it is useful to include books in the course. But maybe not whole books, like parts of them, or maybe short stories or articles. The reading club is a very it's a big investment from the point of the teacher. Yeah, because it takes some preparation. You need to read the book, you need to design the materials. So only if you have a lot of interested students, then you should do that, because I wouldn't probably run it just for a couple of students. Yeah, like either choose something that you would reuse, or if you have a lot of students who would like to read something, that would be feasible, in my opinion. Yeah, about the Quizlet sets, I always provide them in advance. So with the book club, I usually send, so we have the kind of the start of the week when I publish a plan for the week. So like when we have the discussions, what chapters we're supposed to read, and I send them the Quizlet sets, and I ask them to go through them before reading the necessary part. Because in my opinion, again, it works well for noticing. So they have a chance to notice more expressions while reading. Yeah, someone does it while reading, like, look through the set and then start reading straight away. Someone does it after. So actually it's more or less flexible, but I personally find that it's more effective if they work with the Quizlet sets before reading the book. Right. I think no more questions, right? I guess I addressed everything.
There is one more, I suppose, about can you give some tips on books for teenagers, 14, 15 years, so the 8th, 9th grades? I see this
Nadia,
one.
maybe you have. I think you work with teenagers
I
more.
do have some. So yeah, I need just to look through a little bit, but I think I do have some well-rated readers and also like
Yeah, I
book.
think graded readers would come in handy. Yeah. Depends on the level again, because 14, 15 years old could it be of a different level.
Yeah, I mean it might vary quite a lot from like A1 up to C1 easily. So, but yeah, I do have some. I just need
Yeah,
some
yeah.
time.
I think if it's like higher levels, then any kind of teen literature will do. If it's lower level, then probably graded readers, yeah. Something like that. Right. So I'll wrap it up here then, right?
Yeah,
Thank
someone
you very
saying that
much.
your English is a delight.
Thank you very much. That was a nice respite.
Oh, and there is one more question. Someone
Uh-huh.
asked about using audiobooks at the lessons with paper books. So, I mean, I don't really remember what.
Asked about using audiobooks. Yeah, you could use them in
Yeah. So what's your
combination.
opinion about using audiobooks? Yeah, I got back to the
Great. I
question.
mean, like if your students into listening more than reading, that works. I personally think that a combination could work great. For example, they listen to an abstract. Just it's more kind of, the vibe is greater when you listen to it, especially if the speaker is very talented. That's nice. I particularly enjoyed some books that I listened to rather than read. Yeah, you could do that. You can combine them. For example, compare, do maybe some even pronunciation practice, like ask students to read the books out loud, compare to the audio version. That's also a nice activity to do. I don't know. I think like some people are find it harder to keep concentrated while listening to audiobooks. Some people find it more challenging to concentrate while reading to, like a written book. So I think again, you should probably ask your students whatever their preferences are. Yeah, it's just another set of tasks that would be designed, I think.